Please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Good evening. We are here for a workshop. We'll start off with a presentation by Jobs for Maine graduates.
Yes, Mr. Mayor, Councilor Cloutier requested this be placed on the agenda, and we have some representatives from the organization here tonight. Michelle Bourne, who helps coordinate the Learn, Earn, Active Potential program. And with her is Zachary Morin, who is one of the participants in the program.
Good evening, Mayor Bouchard and council members. Thank you for this opportunity to speak on behalf of JMG and our program at Lewiston High School, where we work in a classroom at LRTC, Lewiston Regional Technical Center, and this is Zachary Morin. He's a current Lewiston High School junior. He's the Maine State Future Business Leader of America Treasurer. He's a student council president of LRTC and the president of our JMG Career Association. He is excited to talk to you a little bit and tell you a little bit about what we do at JMG in our high school. So thank you very much. Does he need to say his address?
So, as JMG, we partner with public education and private businesses to offer result-driven solutions to ensure all Maine students graduate high school, attain post-secondary credentials, and pursue meaningful careers. And our goal today is simple. We just want to share with you the impact of the program it has on students and to say how very grateful to the City of Lewiston, to its City Council members, Mayor Bouchard, Senator Libby, Superintendent Webster, and our business partners like Procter & Gamble and the Dempsey Center, Tree Street, and the YWCA, along with many others, for all the support we have. Without these partnerships, our success would be much more difficult to come by. I have been in JMG now for 5 years. I have never considered myself anything but driven to succeed. But like many high school students, I need a lot of support. My peers and I have so many opportunities, but without the guidance, these things could quickly become too overwhelming. JMG is a place where I can get the support I need. My specialist, Brian York, offers financial literacy in the way of budgeting and teaches us about banks, credit unions, insurance, taxes, and how to find cars, apartments, and jobs. We explore careers and the pathways required to become a strong employee while learning the skills needed for today's workforce. We spent over 100 hours doing community service this year alone, and all while researching scholarship opportunities, preparing for leadership roles within our school and at JMG competitions. I feel supported and prepared and excited to move on to my senior year. As the JMG president, I will be representing the Lewiston High School at an intensive summer program at Thomas College next week. An opportunity offered me by my specialist. This is meant to provide a real experience of what college life is like, as well as the ability to earn 3 college credits at an accelerated pace, all free of charge. I have genuinely never met a teacher that cares more for students more than Miss Bourne. She is my specialist at the high school as well. I have had a lot of success in the high school. And our classes, without all that success, it's huge based upon the project-based of things that we do, and most of the time the students lead it with the guiding hand of our specialists. Our career association is made up of about 7 students that represent the over 100 JMG students at Lewiston High School currently. We have 2 senior classes, 8 multi-year classes, and we have hosted a successful job fair for the last 5 years that has brought in over 40 local businesses hiring young people today. JMG holds 2 blood drives each year, and that helped to raise a little over $19,000 in donations for the Dempsey Center during our Spring for Philanthropy walk. We are very, very proud of all of our accomplishments. All 3 specialists at our school spend many hours supporting, guiding, and advocating us while delivering meaningful opportunities to showcase our leadership skills, such as this opportunity tonight. We hope we have highlighted and delivered a brief introduction of JMG. Thank you for listening, and we would all love to invite you into our classroom anytime to see some of the great work that students are doing. We thank you again for your support for our JMG programs, and if there are any questions, we would be happy to answer them.
Thank you. Any questions from the council?
So, not a question, but I was the, before Councilor Ray, I was the city council representative for the school committee, and I remember we would get presentations from your organization, and I would always be impressed with the work that you guys are doing. So, just congratulations on your good work, and thanks for doing it, and thanks for being a continued part of our community.
Thank you.
Anyone else? Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for listening. We appreciate it.
We will now move to a Lewiston Commercial Historic District.
This one is pretty straightforward and pretty simple. I think everybody knows that 197 Lisbon Street, which is across the street from the library, has been purchased by a local business person who's interested in putting market rate housing on the upper floors and retaining commercial space on the Lisbon Street floor. Feasibility of that project is somewhat dependent upon historic tax credits. However, the building itself is not eligible for listing on the National Register. I guess it's been messed around with too much over the years. But it would be eligible for historic tax credits as part of an overall historic district as a contributing structure. Some time ago, a few months ago, the council authorized us to apply for a grant from Maine State Historic Preservation to allow us to undertake a study of establishing a Lisbon Street Commercial Historic District. That study is moving right along, and recently they held a public hearing to ask property owners to come in and comment. Maine Preservation is now considering listing that district or nominating that district to the National Park Service for listing on the National Register. Since we own a building in that stretch, which is the part of the library facing Lisbon Street, we get to vote whether we are supportive or not of having our building included in a historic district. Since we get to vote, I thought I'd bring this to your attention and see if you wanted to vote. You only have to vote no. You don't have to vote yes. You can object to being included in the historic district if the owners of 50% of the buildings, half the buildings, half the properties, object. Then it won't go forward to actually be designated as a historic district. So the only question before you is, do you want to take a position on this or not?
Council Marcotte?
Can you remind us which building is that again?
It's the portion of the library that faces on Lisbon Street.
The Pillsbury block, right?
Yes.
Vacant lots, too. Vacant lots, that is.
Oh, we also own some vacant lots.
And I also had a question, how does that impact us or anybody else that would be listed?
David, you want to?
Question again, Mike?
How does this impact the property owners that didn't necessarily put in the petition in the first place, if they don't opt out?
If they don't, it changes nothing for them, basically. They don't have to, unless you have federal funds involved in your property for rehab purposes or new construction or something, then these provisions will kick in as far as like a higher level of review. But if it's any project that's privately funded, doesn't involve any type of federal funds, nothing changes.
So they won't be handcuffed in anything that they want to do down the road?
That's correct, as long as there isn't federal funds. The only thing that could change is this is going to be at the national level. At some point, the Historic Preservation Review Board, our board, the Lewiston board, may decide that they want to recognize this locally. And then if they recognize it locally, then properties in that area would be subject to certificates of appropriateness or demolition delay, things like that.
Council Clutie?
So you answered Councilor Marcotte's question about the piece of property that the city owns. Can you just kind of help me figure out what 197 Lisbon Street is?
It's the building that had the front facade on it, that had the,
Pawn shop.
Pawn shop.
the pawn shop at the basement.
Okay.
It's diagonally right across the street, or it's directly across the street from the library.
Okay, thank you.
Councilor
I would just strongly encourage the council to take a no vote on this and let it go. I mean, we've already talked about the grant process, and it really doesn't tie hands, and I think it's certainly, we've got preservation as part of our bones, and we should continue that, so thank you.
So I have no objections.
Okay, so basically, you don't have to do anything. You only would have to take a position if you objected to it.
Okay.
So unless I see some interest in council considering objecting to this, we'll assume you won't be, and we won't do anything.
Doing nothing is easy. Okay.
Okay.
Some people say we do that all the time.
Item number 3, proposed modification to NCA zoning district.
Okay, or Mayor Bouchard asked that this be placed on the agenda. Some of you will recall that several years ago, we took a look at the NCA district. The NCA district is basically a single-family district. It does, however, under certain circumstances, permit properties to either be developed as a duplex or turned into a duplex. But that depends largely upon the nature of the immediate area that the property is located in. The concern is that as properties transition into becoming duplexes, there could potentially be creep that spread through the area, leading to additional properties being in a situation where they could be transitioned. So we've included a map in the information it's provided for you that shows the red are multifamily. Not all of those are duplexes. Some of those are actually larger than duplexes. But as you can see, when you start looking at these areas, some areas have very little in the way of duplexes or multifamilies. Other areas have quite a high concentration of them. So the proposal is that we take a look at this. There are a number of options. We could either leave it the way it is. We could prohibit conversions and construction of duplexes in the NCA district, or we might take a look at identifying areas within the district where conversions would be allowed either under the current rules, which again involve whether more than 50% of the impacted properties in the area, which are the ones basically fronting on the streetage near them, have 2 or more dwellings, or more than 50% of the adjoining properties that are developed contain multifamily. So it's not complicated, but it's difficult for an average person to be able to quickly tell whether their property is eligible for conversion or not, unless they're basically surrounded by multifamilies. So we could either leave that provision, which would allow in part of the NCA conversions to take place according to these formulas, or you could basically divide the NCA into an area where duplexes were permitted by right and areas where they're not permitted at all. That would be the easiest for us to administer, but however, it might allow in those areas by right more conversions to take place. Dave and Doug are here to answer questions and go over this and show you the map, the bigger map that might be easier to read. So Dave, I'm going to turn it over to you.
So I'm not sure if everybody has met Doug yet, but this is Doug Green. So Doug Green is new city planner, Deputy Director of Planning and Code Enforcement. So we stole him from Auburn. So we're lucky to have him.
We get all the best ones from Auburn.
Yeah, that's right, exactly. So, so everybody watching at home was like, oh God, you know. The map that you're referencing will be up on that screen in a second, and we can zoom in on it and certainly Doug can give you some information as to what exactly was involved in that. But I think Ed pretty much explained it as far as where we're at, where we have 3 options before us. There we go. So if you guys want us to zoom in on certain areas, maybe Doug, you can just talk about maybe as far as what some of the findings were with respect to what we've done here with the mapping.
Sure. Thanks, Dave. Yeah, using Lewiston's fine GIS system, I was able to isolate all the parcels that are zoned NCA, and there are according to your records, there are 6,384 parcels located within that zone. And then I started using our city's land use codes, we're able to isolate single families, duplexes, multifamily apartments, and so on. And so I grouped the duplexes and anything above 2 unit into one group. That's the red color that you're seeing on the map. So you could see where duplexes or multifamily would be located. This doesn't say anything to what was converted through this process that we're talking about. We did some preliminary exploration of permitting and really only saw a few permits over the last several years at the most. So from a permit standpoint, we're not seeing a lot of activity that way, but when you look at the map, as Dave is kind of scrolling around here, you do see some concentrations of these red areas where there's multifamily within that NCA zone. So also try to isolate, make a note of properties that were vacant because they might be eligible for development purposes. And that's pretty much the observations of a pretty straightforward and simple GIS evaluation of this. That would take further study or research to kind of quantify maybe areas that really reached some concentration or density of these type of properties. So that's what we found.
Councilor Wright.
On this map, you have a tally of things. I'm assuming apartments means 4 or more units?
Correct.
Thank you.
So in the information we received, it says that you reviewed records and only identified 2 duplexes that were added in the zone since 2002. Out of how many requests that you got to do this kind of thing? Like, did 2 people request it and they both got granted, or were there like 500 requests and only 2 of them were?
Good question. I don't know how many requests we received.
Okay.
We don't necessarily track that as far as how many people did we say no to. It's not uncommon for people to ask us to be able to do duplexes, not just in the NCA district, which is what has been highlighted on this map, but throughout the city. And we only allow duplexes, and I can double check, but I believe is only in 2 zoning districts in the community. And I know one of those zoning districts is the medium density residential, which is kind of outer Sabata Street. And Doug's pointing out to me MDR and downtown residential. And there's some exceptions in the highway business where you can do a 2-family too, but again, it's under unique circumstances. So really, we only have 2 zoning districts today that you can do duplexes in. So one could argue, should there be more flexibility throughout the city? At the same rate, there are certainly neighborhoods that the threat for more I shouldn't say use the word threat, but the possibility of more 2 units being allowed in an NCA exists, and does that impact that neighborhood? If it's, are we worried about trying to keep the single family character of that neighborhood, or are we okay expanding based upon some of the existing, development patterns in that area?
So just a follow-up question on that, do you know where those 2, like what streets or what areas?
Those 2 other or those 2 that were?
Those 2 that were approved.
I don't, no.
Okay.
Some folks on the council recall we had this discussion, I believe, 2 years ago, and that number, I believe in Ed's memo, was from 2 years ago. I did ask staff if we had any additional ones within, again, within the last 5 years. We haven't had any.
Okay. And then I guess just in your, you just mentioned we have only two zones where this is allowed right now.
Correct.
in your in reading this, it sounds to me like there are some pretty good backstops in place in terms of, you know, the number of these that get approved, and it's not just some, you know, kind of easy thing to get approved. And I'm just wondering, from your professional perspective, you know, is that accurate? Do you feel like there's, because what I don't want to do is restrict it so much that it's impossible to do this, but I also don't want it to be, you know, so non-restrictive that anyone can be putting.
Free for all?
Right.
Yeah, so the criteria are hard to meet right now.
Okay.
I mean, they are. In my tenure here, with past staff that have been here for 20, 30 years, I mean, they could probably count on, you know, two hands how many times this has actually happened within the community. Because as Ed mentioned, it's not just the abutting properties that you have to look at, but it's the adjoining properties as well. So by definition, adjoining properties is everything within 500 feet. There are times when it can be met, and actually when it's met, we're all like, hey, how about that? It can be met. Great. Is that a good thing or a bad thing? You know, I guess that's why we're before you folks here tonight to, you know, to determine whether or not we should maintain that flexibility. Should we make it more strict? As Ed suggested, maybe there are certain areas in these areas that Doug's identified that we should come up with another provision or another overlay or something to continue to allow that conversion to occur. Because there are certainly neighborhoods, when you look on here, where there are probably more units, more properties with more than 2 units than there are single families. You might ask them, should it even be zoned NCA? NCA is really a single family district at that point. Maybe it shouldn't even be a single family district at that point. Maybe we should revisit the zoning entirely. But that's certainly, you know, if we want to go that direction, we need that instruction, I guess.
Right, so just briefly before, I'll get to you guys in a second. You know, I brought this up, I had a lot of concerns during the campaign about single-family neighborhoods, the character of single-family neighborhoods, and keeping it as such. I got stopped in the hallway at Longley this morning voting, and someone actually talked to me about it. I don't think we should necessarily put tougher restrictions on all of the district. I think if we can identify, and, you know, Ed and I had a meeting today, and we looked at some areas where it really makes sense to allow and maybe make it easier to create duplexes and multi-units in some of these areas where it's already predominantly, well, red on our maps. But for the rest of it, where it is a single-family neighborhood, make it much more difficult or impossible and keep the single-family character of that particular neighborhood. It wouldn't change things too much, but just allow it in certain zones where it's appropriate and keep the character where it's not. So it was really the goal and my thoughts, and I'd love to see what an overlay district would look like. Not sure whether or not we would approve it, but I think it would do some justice to see what that would look like and what the impacts may be. So with that, Councilor Lyson.
Sure, thank you, Mayor.
Yep.
My concern is to do this in a kind of a piecemeal basis. We just adopted a new comprehensive plan. We're talking about new zoning and land use code, you know, amendments to be consistent with that. I think there's a place for 2 families, and, you know, historically it's been the way to provide affordable housing for 2 families, frankly. And some of the conversions, when people have more house than they need, it makes some sense. They're downsizing, but they're also allowing someone else to have affordable housing too. So I think we need to be flexible. I like the idea of drilling down into the NCA a little bit different. We've always had situations where we said, why is this NCA or whatever? Because NCA was deemed to be single family only, and it's just not true. So I do think that, I know that's going to take a long time, so I'd rather defer any type of amendment until we take a real comprehensive look at this. And I know staffing's an issue, but I do think we can make some sense out of all the NCAs and in what I'd like to think a comprehensive manner and a thoughtful manner. And where it's appropriate, do it, and where it's not. But I don't want to limit people. And I think if we've had 2 in almost over 15 years, conversions, I don't think we're going to look at a lot of new construction that way that would harm single-family neighborhoods. But the sooner the better that we take a look at this, and it's been an issue for a long, long time, almost 30 years, I think. So, thank you.
Councilor Patton.
So I sort of agree that, you know, this is about protecting the identity of the neighborhoods. And I think it lends itself very well to the introduction of form-based code. I think that may help with it, because I would hate to see the idea of different types of housing go away, much the way people look at accessory use dwellings. You know, there's a great ways to add in-law apartments. Off the top of my head, I don't know if we allow them. Last I knew, oh, we do? Good. You know, cottage courts, things of that nature.
Granny flats.
Yeah, yeah, smaller dwellings. But I do think that form-based code would help us a lot with this, especially with the readability of the code. And yeah. So I would be more apt to say, let's not change it now, and, you know, much to Counselor License point of let's do the right thing. Let's not piecemeal it and see if the patchwork sticks. Thank you.
So can we get an idea of what an overlay or what another possible solution would look like as we? And that's what this is really about. It's not about this ordinance necessarily going forward as is. It's finding a way forward. And I want to address too with the 2 added since '02. That is true, but we're in a situation in Lewiston now where you cannot rent an apartment. It's getting much more difficult, and we've already seen it. I'm not going to name streets here on TV, but we've actually seen some of these red areas where people have purchased houses, moved out of state. The lawns aren't mowed. They don't care who's in it for tenants. That it just really diminishes the character of the whole street, even though it's multifamilies, and 2 or 3 of them just don't look good. They're not being taken care of. We've seen landlords who some of us on this council have labeled differently, buying in these districts and converting and doing that, and none of us want to see that in single-family neighborhoods or even in areas that are predominantly red. We don't want to see them going. So I like that, you know, I think we're all on board to do something, and if we can continue the conversation, I think it's great, and do what we can for the single-family neighborhoods. Anybody else?
Just like to
Sure.
add a thing on top of what you said. I've canvassed pretty much every neighborhood in this community at one time or another, and every little neighborhood has a foreclosed property.
Oh, yeah.
So, I mean, it's pandemic across. It's not.
We have something else coming for that.
Yeah, it's not single it's not this neighborhood, whatever, the best of neighborhoods. There's foreclosures, so it's an issue that maybe we need to deal with down the road as well. And I agree with Councilor Pettengill about the form-based code, and I know, Doug, you've got some background in that too, so that would be helpful, because often it's not what you do, but how you do it. Right. That's important, so thank you.
Anyone else? Councilor Cludier?
So not related to this, but somewhat related to this, is the planning board looking at form-based code?
So it's on the list,
Okay.
so to speak.
Like,
You know,
high towards the top or towards the bottom?
I would say it's in the top third.
Okay.
You know, part of the attraction of having Doug part of the department now is that he was involved in wrapping up the form-based code over in Auburn, so he does have some familiarity with that. So that's a leg up for us on that. I want to caution everybody, because I do hear people talking about form-based code for the last 3-4 years, like it's going to fix everything. It's not going to fix everything. It's going to be another tool in the box, you know, that we can use to improve certain situations in our ordinance, because our ordinance is by no means perfect. But I don't want to give people's hopes up that, oh, I thought form-based code was going to address all this. I don't know that it's going to. I think it's just another tool that we can use to maybe, you know, whether it's address density in single-family homes or the appearance of multifamilies in the Tree Street neighborhoods. It's something that we can use that we don't have available to us now. So.
Okay, thank you. Anyone? Councilor Marcotte?
Were these NCA geographies all one-family homes, single-family homes at one time?
That I don't know. I would venture to say no. I know they're not. There's certain neighborhoods on there that I am familiar with where they were developed as 2 families from day one.
From day one. You know, because that was my thinking, especially where, you know, the density of the red spots
Like
quite high.
and I'll zoom in on it, but there's Dupuy Avenue off of Farwell. All these dots right here that I'm kind of highlighting up there, those are all 2 families. and it is absolutely a single-family neighborhood there, with the exception of that,
One
you know, exactly. So
A lot of
But
the,
all of those two families look like one families.
they do,
look
and so
nice.
to maybe Zach's point, you know, it's what do these things look like too? We've had that issue with our in-law provisions where we started having in-laws being built and they were looking like two families, and we had some neighbors complaining that, you know, it doesn't fit the size and scale of the neighborhood. So a number of years ago, you folks on the board changed our in-law provisions to limit the size of the in-law, so you didn't end up with two houses basically attached to each other.
So were they built as duplexes?
Yes, on this example, yes, they were.
Could we?
Yeah.
when you see a pattern like this, it's pretty much indicative that probably most of this developed prior to the zoning ordinance being adopted.
Yeah, I was going to mention.
And they were grandfathered as a
Yep.
result?
Yeah, I didn't do it, but it's another fairly simple evaluation tool, is just selecting color code by age, and you could see the age of different development areas, and that's going to tell another story.
Because when you mentioned that there's only been 2 conversions since 2002, there's several that I can think of that may not have actually fallen into this class, but very well could have. I don't know if I have the address correct, but 299 Webster Street. There's 2 buildings side by side, just as you come out of Farwell, that were single-family at one time, and now they're 2-family, and it's not owner-occupied, as far as I know. And that's my biggest concern. If the duplex is not going to be owner-occupied, it's going to change the character of that neighborhood even more. And I think that was the concern a couple of years ago, and it's the concern going forward. There are some areas here where you don't even see a red dot whatsoever. And one of those people approached me this morning as well, and giving me a horror story of a particular property that probably couldn't even be redesigned into a duplex, but had something else going on, where there were people coming out of the home looking like they're coming out of a clown car. There were so many people, so I'm sure they were in violation of something. But the concern there is if there are opportunities to create duplexes, and with people getting up in age, selling their homes, moving away, passing, this could become a big problem, and I'd want to get my hands around it now before it does and gets out of control.
Yeah, your concern has been shared by other property owners as far as do these become investment properties versus owner-occupied? I would not recommend that we start having an ordinance that says that, properties need to be owner-occupied. That's just a bear to enforce. I mean, it's not impossible, but I don't think that's somewhere we would necessarily want to go. Our in-law provisions are a challenge enough because you can have an in-law anywhere in the community, and they has to be a blood relative, and it's a pretty broad definition as to what a blood relative is. And I don't know what happens to those blood relatives when they leave, and we just don't find out, quite frankly, until, the neighbors call up and say, hey, I think there's a college professor living over there or something like that. Oh, geez, and it may not be an issue, but, so my only point is owner occupancy, maintaining that, regulating that, that's a trick.
I would be interested in knowing the 2 in the last 16 years.
Yeah.
Which properties they consist of, and comparing that to, then I can share the ones that I'm thinking would fall into that category, and maybe explain why they don't, that sort of thing.
Yeah, if you could let us know what those are, we can do some research on them.
The 1 or 2 that I mentioned on Webster Street, I think there's one on Rosedale, and I'll come up with a few others for you.
Yep, sure.
What else as we close? Number 3? All right.
Thank you, guys.
Into number 4. Should be a quick and easy one.
Yes, number 4 is relatively easy. Right now, commercial parking in residential zone is limited to 1 passenger type van, small utility van, or pickup truck, but not including tow trucks or ambulances. And the recommendation has come forward to allow one enclosed trailer not to exceed 16 feet in length. I think the notion is here we are seeing more and more people who are working out of their own homes, and they may have, if you're a contractor, you may have a pickup truck, and you may have a trailer that goes with it. And right now, if you have a trailer, you can't park that trailer on your property. So.
Well, that's kind of accurate, but if you have an enclosed trailer, and it's just a plain enclosed trailer, you can park it on your property.
Yeah, correct.
If you put your company name on that trailer, you are now in violation of code.
Correct.
Which
Thank
makes no sense whatsoever.
Silly code.
Silly code.
Who writes this stuff?
But I would advocate, as I look at this, I would maybe advocate to go up as high as 18 feet on the trailer to give a little more flexibility. That would be my personal choice. Mine's only 14 foot, so it's not self-serving. Council license.
What the heck's enclosed mean?
Instead of an open-sided trailer, so I can see that you got lawn and garden equipment on it, it's an enclosed trailer. It's got walls, it's got a roof.
So it's like the ones you can put snowmobiles in?
Yeah.
Right,
Yeah, I mean, most of these
Something kind of
landscapers
like-
now have enclosed trailers as well. We used to get complaints, I mean, that's, a common complaint would be, I say common, it depends if it bothers the neighbor at all. The guy's doing landscaping next door, he brings home his big truck, which he could do as a matter of right, but he's got a 16 or 18-foot trailer behind it with all of his equipment on it, and I don't like seeing that. So then they call us and we tell them, you can't have that. But at the same time, they could have a trailer out there with their four-wheelers on it and their snowmobiles and whatever other toys they have, and they can do that as a matter of right, as long as it's not, it meets setback and yard requirements and things like that. More and more, you see these people, having enclosed trailers where they have their sleds and toys and everything in it. So we don't even know what's in it. It could be a commercial trailer, and I don't even know.
Does this have wheels, the
Oh,
trailer?
yeah.
It's not, what if, can somebody get like an 18-foot box trailer and just park it on somebody's property without
Yeah.
wheels?
Without wheels?
Like a pod?
That'd be more of a shed.
I know. That's what I'm concerned about. It's the interpretation of an enclosed trailer. Because,
Well, I suppose we could make it more clear that this has to be a registered, registered street-worthy vehicle or something to that effect. But certainly the intent isn't for someone to take the axles off this thing and all of a sudden make it a shed. If that's the case, then we would regulate it as a structure, make sure it has proper
okay,
footing.
because that's the,
building permit.
I've seen these sheds turned into dwelling units.
Right, yeah.
These-
Yeah, no, like a container or
Yeah,
something.
right,
like that.
Tiny house?
Right, yeah.
There you go.
Yeah.
So the other thing is, you said it has to meet both front and side yards
Correct.
requirements?
So they're parking in their in their driveway or something to that effect. And most zoning districts have yard requirements where you can't put pavement so many feet from a side property line. So the idea is that you can't park your stuff right next to the property line.
Unless they do it on the lawn.
No, that's exactly. And then we all can think of somebody's house where they have, toys parked on the lawn or something like that. And in certain circumstances, it's probably not an issue, but it's also probably a violation of our ordinance. The point with this amendment here is just to make it more user-friendly for people who have a home-based business. If I can bring home my snowmobile trailer, has 4 sleds on it, and it says Skidoo on it, but I can't bring home my trailer that says Dave's Plumbing and Heating on it, is there really a difference between those two things? That's what we're talking about.
I think it makes it much more business-friendly.
Yeah, I mean, again, if somebody's doing that, they would get a home occupation permit from us, that technically, you're a home-based business, you can't have any stock and trade, you can't have any employees on site other than those people that live there. So Doug can be my employee, but he shouldn't be meeting me at my house in the morning, and we all take off in the truck to go mow lawns. We can, meet at, some other establishment or parking ride or something like that. This is really about bringing home commercial equipment and putting limitations. That's why it has those limitations there as to 1-passenger van, small utility van, pickup truck, to provide some flexibility for those type of, handyman type or single contractors.
And I can tell you from experience, it's really hard when you first start out, if you don't have a commercial location, to go somewhere else and park your vehicles. It took me a very long time to get to that point. Councilor LaJoy?
Your complaints, are they mostly in housing districts, development areas?
Single-family neighborhoods, really.
This is what I mean, yeah. So it would be a piece of property, 100 by 100, closely related to the next piece of property and
Exactly.
somebody parks, okay.
Yeah, if you're in a rural part of Lewiston, I mean, you know, no one's probably complaining because you can't see it. You got 3 acres, and for all I know, they have 4 trailers back there already that I don't even know about. It's your dense neighborhoods where, you know, homes are close to each other, parking lots are close to each other.
Right,
that type
right,
of thing.
right, okay.
Councilor Cludier?
So it sounds to me, just from this conversation and from the paperwork that we have, that this is kind of like an arbitrary thing. So it's like, you can do this if it doesn't have your business name on it, but as soon as you put your business name on it, forget it. So I don't feel like we're changing anything, really. And so I guess I would be, you know, in favor of this amendment.
I can tell you, and Councilor Lyson may have been with the city at this point, but my understanding, this whole provision came in because of a potato chip truck, where someone was bringing home a potato chip.
Potato chip truck
Yeah,
provision.
the potato chip provision, that's right, exactly. And someone didn't like the potato chip truck in their neighborhood, and this amendment was created whenever because of that.
Councilor Marcotte, did you?
I'm still trying to understand the original language. And as you're talking, I was reading the proposed text. So, in the original language, when it says, except for, does that mean that you can have 1 commercial vehicle now?
Yes,
So the suggestion is having more than 1 commercial vehicle.
you can have 1 passenger type van, small utility van or pickup truck, and 1 enclosed trailer. I can bring home my van and I can have a 16-foot trailer behind it.
If they're attached, that would not be permissible currently?
That's correct.
It would be considered 2 vehicles?
No, it would be considered a commercial, well, yeah, to your point, it's a commercial vehicle, and you can't bring home another commercial vehicle. You can't bring home a commercial trailer. If it's for your own personal use, that's fine.
You can bring home a commercial trailer that doesn't have your business name on it.
Right.
But you can't bring one that has your business name on it.
So if you're using a commercial vehicle to tow your boat, that'd be permissible?
Correct.
If you're using a commercial van to tow a enclosed trailer with all of your tools in it, that would not be permissible?
Correct.
Tools for the business?
2 tools for the business, that's correct. The idea is the intent, I would say, is that there needs to be some type of limit, so you don't have the contractor, which we inevitably do, that brings home all of their equipment and starts putting all their staging outside. Or, you know, maybe they're a small landscaper, but they have a skid steer and a small backhoe, and they're bringing that home as well. You don't want that on a 100 by 100 foot lot. You may be a great neighbor, his lawn's probably immaculate, but do you want all that type of equipment?
He probably has the worst lawn on the street.
He may, I don't know.
Tell you from experience.
I was just gonna say.
He doesn't have time to do his own.
That's right.
So, I mean, the idea is to place some limits on this, but have some flexibility for those people who have a home-based business.
And we may not see it as much today, but 30, 40 years ago, I can see where that was a problem, and probably why this language came about, is because that existed. I can tell you one on my street that probably got the neighbor's dander up. And it was probably more likely to happen in that era than today.
We still do get complaints when people, we getting 1 complaint over off Main Street, as I recall, where somebody was parking their semi-truck.
Yeah.
In that case, it was on the street. Wouldn't fit in the driveway, but we've had occasions where people are parking large vehicles in a neighborhood, sometimes to the extent where it almost blocks traffic, particularly in the wintertime.
Yeah, well, the tow truck one, that happens, because those guys are on call, they want to bring home their tow truck. We get the complaint all the time about that, unfortunately, because he's in and out, he's in and out. Sorry, park it somewhere else.
Does anyone have objection going up to 18 feet on the trailer?
I have no objection.
Wow.
I'll just tell you, I just did a quick scan of trailer websites and the range of sizes, 4 foot up to 22, 24 foot, so I'll leave it up to you on scale and size,
I would-
16 feet, 18 feet.
Yeah,
So you're more common.
I wouldn't go greater than 18 feet, only from a parking design
Right.
perspective. Our parking requirements talk about a space being 9 by 18. So if a single-family home has 2 spots and one of them's occupied by the truck and the other one's occupied by a 24-foot trailer, it's probably getting tight.
Council Marcotte?
So how would the, get the right terminology for this, the vacation homes fit into this?
An RV?
An RV. Some of those can be quite long.
Yeah, so they are not a vehicle utilized for commerce, so they are exempt from that. But occasionally we'll get,
Unless you're a touring van.
unless you're a touring van, I suppose. The complaint we usually get with those is that they're parked in a yard area or something like that, because they end up parking them on the grass or something, and inevitably we have to tell them, hey, move it a couple feet to the left or the right or something like that. Or more common this time of year is, the in-laws are there and they want to spend the entire summer there, and they're,
They have the generator running.
So are we okay to have this on a future agenda?
Right. Can I ask one more question?
Okay, you just did.
Would it be feasible to put a lot size in there, identify a lot size? I know you're saying residential area. Residential areas are usually about 100 by 100, we'll say, in a development. But if, let's say a lot size 2 acres, that you could be allowed to park those types of vehicle? Just a question.
Yeah, no, I mean, the council can certainly consider adding language in there that says you have to have a minimum lot size to do this.
Yeah.
If you have, I guess you can make the argument that if you have the ability to park this on your property, if you can meet your yard and setback requirements, and that provides you the ability to pave whatever area of your lot, do you folks want to limit people's use of that paved area?
We're still going to have to deal with the individuals that don't particularly like to see that particular vehicle in the yard.
That's true, and it exists now. So if they don't like seeing a small utility van, a small cube van there,
Right.
and now all of a sudden that guy's bringing home his trailer now as well.
Right, right.
You're
The
right.
only thing that changes here is the lettering on the trailer or not. They
Right.
can still bring the trailer
Yeah.
now.
That's
It's
true.
just a matter of, can we allow them to advertise on the trailer and, have their
Are they
business
using
name
it for
or not?
commerce? Right. They want to bring home that big trailer and it has toys in it, that's fine. And then neighbors might not like it now.
Right. Could it also, if an individual would approach the city, could it be on a one-on-one basis as well, with regards as to property size and stuff like that?
No, we have to have a general rule. Any one-on-one opens us to.
Right, right.
Yeah,
We have a guideline, I'm sure of
It
that.
would have to be a general rule.
However, is there somewhere where, you can move? Because I understand what the mayor is talking about, someone starting a small business and you don't have an establishment to put your equipment. It's very useful to be able to put it on your property. So, I can relate to that. Go from there. Thank you.
Just one thing, can we get a ban on potato chip trucks?
Specifically,
Potato chips.
Councilor Lyson, I believe you're up.
Okay.
Real quick, if I could
I got one for you.
pass something out to everybody. I found this on Facebook earlier. It's a wonderful article that talks about community murals as economic development tools. And I thought it was pretty appropriate, Garen, with what's going on Pine Street on the garage. And I'm sure everybody's seen it at this point, but if you haven't seen it, it's pretty incredible.
Nice,
Yeah.
very nice.
Thanks, Zach.
Pleasure.
Councilor Lyson.
Yes, I'd like to make a motion that we go into executive session to discuss labor negotiations regarding the Maine Association of Police Patrol Unit.
Second.
All in favor? Yep.
Don't get up. The back room is in use for the election, so we're actually going to do the executive